Picture this: a grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers casting diamonds of light across marble floors. 500 of the city's wealthiest, most powerful people standing in stunned silence. And in the center of it all, a woman in a designer gown worth more than most people's houses. Her name is Lily. 6 months ago, she was begging for spare change outside a hospital. Tonight, she's the most powerful person in the room. But here's what makes this moment unforgettable. Kneeling at Lily's feet, mascara streaming down her face, designer dress crumpled on the floor, is Victoria Blackwood. The same woman who once called Lily gutter trash. The same woman who forced her to wear a servant's uniform to her own wedding. The same woman who made her eat in the kitchen with the hired help. Now Victoria is sobbing, begging, pleading for mercy. "Please," she whispers. "I'll do anything. I'll give everything back. Just please have mercy." Lily looks down at the woman who tormented her, and what she says next will leave you speechless. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. How did a homeless beggar end up holding the fate of a billionaire dynasty in her hands? How did the woman everyone laughed at become the one everyone fears? And what dark secret connects these two women in ways neither of them ever imagined? To understand this moment, to truly appreciate the justice you're about to witness, we need to go back 6 months. Back to the day Alexander Blackwood, one of the richest men in America, was told he had 90 days to live. And the only person who could save him? A woman with no name, no home, and no idea that her blood was worth more than gold. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you see wealth, power, and the people society throws away. Alexander Blackwood had everything. At 32 years old, he was the CEO of Blackwood Industries, a $40 billion empire spanning technology, real estate, and pharmaceuticals. He owned penthouses in New York, London, and Dubai. His face had graced the cover of Forbes 3 times. Women wanted him. Men wanted to be him. But Alexander Blackwood was also completely, utterly alone. See, there's something you need to understand about Alexander. When he was 10 years old, he watched his mother die. A rare genetic blood disorder, the kind that strikes without warning and kills without mercy. He held her hand in that hospital room, felt her grip loosen, watched the light leave her eyes. That day, something inside Alexander died too. He built walls around his heart, walls so high, so thick, that no one could get through. He trusted no one, loved no one. His relationships were transactions. His friendships were strategic. Even his smiles were calculated. And then, 3 months ago, the walls came crashing down. Alexander collapsed during a board meeting. One moment, he was reviewing quarterly projections. The next, he was on the floor, gasping for air, watching the horrified faces of his executives blur above him. The diagnosis was devastating. The same genetic disorder that killed his mother had awakened in him. Without a bone marrow transplant from a perfect genetic match, he would be dead within 90 days. 90 days. His medical team searched every database on the planet. They contacted specialists in 12 countries. They offered millions to anyone who could help. Nothing. The genetic markers required for a match were so rare that fewer than 1 in 10 million people possessed them. And none of those people were registered donors. Alexander lay in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, contemplating something he'd never faced before, his own mortality. But that wasn't even the worst part. See, while Alexander was dying, his stepmother Victoria and stepsister Clarissa were already circling. He could see it in their eyes when they visited. The fake sympathy, the practiced tears, the way they glanced at each other when they thought he wasn't looking. They were planning his funeral before he was even dead. Victoria had married Alexander's father, Richard, just 18 months after his mother passed. She brought her daughter Clarissa into the family, and together they'd spent 2 decades positioning themselves for exactly this moment. Alexander's death meant they would inherit everything, and they couldn't wait. But then, something extraordinary happened. Alexander's doctor walked into his room with a look on his face that Alexander couldn't read. Shock. Confusion? Hope. "We found a match," the doctor said quietly. "A perfect genetic match. The first one in the entire global database." Alexander sat up, his heart pounding. Where? Who is it? I'll pay anything. The doctor hesitated. That's the thing, Mr. Blackwood. You're not going to believe where we found her. He handed Alexander a photograph. A woman. Young. Tangled hair. Worn clothes. Sitting on a piece of cardboard with a handwritten sign. She was homeless. And she was sitting right outside this very hospital. Her name was Lily. At least, that's what she called herself. The truth was, Lily didn't really know who she was. She'd been found wandering the streets at age 5, alone, confused, with no memory of where she came from or who her parents were. No identification. No records. No name. Just a frightened little girl who couldn't remember anything before that moment. She'd bounced through the foster care system for 13 years. Some homes were tolerable. Others were nightmares she still couldn't talk about. When she turned 18, the system spit her out with nothing, no family, no money, no skills, no support. Within 6 months, she was living on the streets. For 3 years, Lily survived in ways most people couldn't imagine. Soup kitchens, homeless shelters, begging for change outside businesses until security guards chased her away. But here's what made Lily different from her circumstances. She never became bitter. She never became cruel. Despite everything life had thrown at her, she maintained a quiet dignity that made people look twice. There was something in her eyes, a strength, a grace, that didn't match her surroundings. She'd chosen the name Lily because a kind volunteer at a shelter once told her she reminded her of a flower growing through concrete. Beautiful despite the harshness. Resilient despite the odds. That day, the day everything changed, Lily was sitting outside St. Catherine's Hospital. It was a good spot. People leaving hospitals were often emotional, often generous. She wasn't begging aggressively, just sitting quietly with her cardboard sign, hoping for enough change to buy dinner. That's when she saw him, a tall man in an expensive coat, walking out of the hospital with the weight of the world on his shoulders. His face was pale. His eyes were distant. He moved like someone who'd just received devastating news. He almost tripped over her legs. Their eyes met. Most rich people looked through Lily like she was invisible, or they looked at her with disgust, pity, contempt. But this man looked at her differently, like he was actually seeing her. Bad day, Lily asked quietly. The man blinked. For a moment, something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. Then the walls went back up, and he walked away without a word. Lily watched him go, then shrugged and went back to her sign. She had no idea that man was Alexander Blackwood, and she had absolutely no idea that 3 days later, his people would come for her with an offer that would change both their lives forever. But here's the thing about Lily. When they made their offer, $500,000 for her bone marrow, she did something that shocked everyone. She said, "No, I'm not a product." That's what Lily said when Alexander's assistant offered her $500,000 for her bone marrow. The assistant, a perfectly polished woman named Miranda, stared at her in disbelief. "I'm sorry, did you just refuse $500,000? Lily nodded calmly. "I heard what your doctor said. This isn't a one-time donation. Because of the severity of his condition, I need to provide multiple donations over 18 months. I'd basically belong to your company. My body would be your property. You'd be compensated. I'd be owned." Lily shook her head. "I've been powerless my whole life. I won't sell the only thing I've left, my freedom, no matter how much money you offer." Miranda returned to the Blackwood estate with the news. Victoria Blackwood listened carefully. A slow smile spread across her face. See, Victoria was playing a complicated game. If Alexander died, she and Clarissa inherited everything. Good outcome. But if Alexander lived and this homeless girl became a problem, talked to the press, made demands, caused scandals that could threaten everything. Either way, this girl needed to be controlled. What if we made her family? Victoria suggested, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Alexander looked at his stepmother with disgust. "What are you talking about? Marriage. A contract. She becomes your wife in name only, bound to you legally. In exchange, we provide her with everything she could ever want. Food, shelter, clothing, and $10 million when the 18 months are complete." "That's insane. That's security." Victoria's eyes glittered. Think about it, Alexander. A legal wife can't be compelled to testify against you. She can't sell her story to tabloids. She's bound by marital contracts. It's the safest option for everyone. Alexander refused. For 2 weeks, he refused. Then he collapsed again. This time, he was unconscious for 18 hours. When he woke up, his doctor was blunt. You have maybe 6 weeks now. Your condition is accelerating. 6 weeks. Alexander thought about his father, gentle, confused, manipulated by Victoria for years. He thought about Blackwood Industries, his mother's legacy, his life's work. He thought about what would happen to it all when Victoria got her hands on it. He couldn't let that happen, so he went to Lily himself. He found her in the same spot outside the hospital. He sat down on the cold concrete next to her, something no billionaire had probably ever done. I know this sounds insane, he said quietly. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm dying, and you're the only person in the world who can save me. I'm not offering you a transaction. I'm asking you, person to person, will you help me? Lily studied his face for a long moment. She saw something there she recognized. Loneliness. Okay, she whispered. I'll help you. She had no idea she was walking into a pit of vipers. And she had no idea that the biggest snake was already planning her destruction. The wedding was held at the Blackwood estate, a stunning property with manicured gardens, marble fountains, and enough grandeur to make a princess feel inadequate. 300 guests attended. Politicians, CEOs, old money families whose names appeared on buildings and university halls. And Lily stood among them in a plain white servant's uniform. Not a wedding dress. A servant's uniform. Victoria had arranged it the night before. She'd come to Lily's room with a garment bag and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I had something special made for you, Victoria purred. Something appropriate for a girl of your background. When Lily opened the bag, her stomach dropped. This is a maid's outfit. It's white, Victoria said coldly. That makes it a wedding dress. Be grateful you're getting anything at all. Let's not pretend you're anything more than medical equipment with a ring, dear. Lily wanted to refuse, but she thought about Alexander, weak, pale, dying. She thought about the contract she'd signed. She thought about surviving. So she put on the uniform. The ceremony itself was brief. Alexander looked at her with something like guilt in his eyes, but he said nothing. The guests whispered behind their hands. Clarissa and her socialite friends giggled openly. At the reception, things got worse. Clarissa approached Lily with a glass of red wine and a vicious smile. Congratulations on your wedding day, she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Oops. The wine splashed across Lily's chest, staining the white fabric crimson. Clarissa gasped in fake horror. Oh no, I'm so clumsy. Someone get the cleaning girl a towel. Oh wait, she is the cleaning girl. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Lily stood there, wine dripping down her dress, surrounded by people who saw her as less than human. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She simply stood there with a dignity that made some of the guests look away in shame. Dinner was served in the grand dining hall. Lily moved toward the main table. After all, she was technically the bride. Victoria intercepted her. Where do you think you're going? To sit with my husband. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. Oh, honey, the family table is for family. You'll take your meals in the kitchen with the staff. That's where you belong. That night, Lily was shown to her quarters, a small room in the servants' wing, as far from Alexander as possible. She sat on the narrow bed, still in her wine-stained uniform, and finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what she'd agreed to. But then she heard a knock. It was Alexander. He looked exhausted. The ceremony had drained what little energy he had, but he was carrying her small bag of belongings. Come with me, he said quietly. He led her to a guest suite on the family floor, spacious, comfortable, with a view of the gardens. This is your room now, he said, not the servants' quarters. I'm sorry about today. I should have stopped it. He left a note on her pillow before he went. I'm sorry. This isn't what I promised. Give me time to make it right. That night, Lily cried for the first time in years. Not from sadness, from a shock of unexpected kindness. But Victoria wasn't done. What she had planned next would push Lily to the very edge and accidentally reveal a secret that had been buried for over 20 years. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. Luxury surrounded Lily, priceless art on the walls, gourmet food in the kitchen, silk sheets on her bed. But the emotional abuse was constant, suffocating, relentless. Victoria found 100 ways to remind Lily of her place. Lily, be a dear and clear the breakfast dishes. Lily, the gardener needs someone to carry the fertilizer bags. Lily, we're having guests tonight. Perhaps you should eat in your room. We wouldn't want to make people uncomfortable. When business associates visited the estate, Victoria introduced Lily as Alexander's little charity project or his temporary situation. Never as his wife. Never as family. Clarissa was even worse. She'd accidentally bump into Lily, spilling coffee on her clothes. She'd comment loudly about the smell of the streets whenever Lily walked past. She'd leave cruel, anonymous notes under Lily's door. You don't belong here. Everyone knows it. Even he knows it. But here's what Victoria and Clarissa didn't expect. Lily didn't break. She absorbed every insult with quiet grace. She completed every humiliating task without complaint. She never raised her voice, never fought back, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. And she did something even more remarkable. She made friends. The household staff adored her. Unlike the Blackwood women, who treated them like furniture, Lily learned their names, asked about their families, helped with tasks she wasn't required to do. The head chef started saving extra portions for her. The housekeeper brought her fresh flowers. And then there was Richard. Alexander's father was 72 years old and suffering from early-stage dementia. His mind wandered. He often didn't recognize Victoria or Clarissa. Most days, he sat alone in the garden, lost in memories no one else could see. But something strange happened when Lily visited him. Elena, Richard said one afternoon, gripping Lily's hand with surprising strength. Tears welled in his faded blue eyes. Elena, you came back. I missed you so much. Lily didn't know anyone named Elena, but she saw the joy, the desperate hope in the old man's face, and she couldn't bring herself to correct him. I'm here now, she said gently, patting his hand. I'm here. From that day on, Lily spent an hour with Richard every afternoon. She read to him, listened to his wandering stories, held his hand when he got confused. One day, Alexander came looking for his father and stopped in the doorway. He watched Lily reading poetry to Richard, watched his father smile for the first time in months, and something shifted in his chest. He started paying attention to Lily after that. He noticed how she fed the stray cats that gathered in the garden, how she remembered every staff member's birthday, how she never complained about Victoria's cruelty, even though she had every right to. He started spending more time with her. Tell me about your life, he said one evening as they walked through the gardens. Before all this. So Lily told him. The foster homes, the streets, the years of hunger and fear and loneliness, and the strange, empty space where her memories should be. I don't remember anything before age 5, she admitted. I don't know who I really am. I chose Lily because someone once said I reminded them of a flower growing through concrete. Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Emotion, connection, hope. But that name, Elena, would prove to be more than an old man's confusion. It was a key to a secret that would shatter everything Victoria had built. 3 months had passed since the wedding. Alexander's condition had stabilized after the first bone marrow donation. Color had returned to his face. Strength had returned to his body. He was attending board meetings again, making decisions, rebuilding his life. But something else was happening too. Something unexpected. He was falling in love with his wife. Not because she'd save his life, though she had. Not because she was legally bound to him, though she was. He was falling in love with who she was. Her kindness in the face of cruelty. Her strength despite her circumstances. Her refusal to become bitter, even when bitterness would have been justified. He started defending her publicly. At a charity gala, Clarissa made a snide comment about Lily's dress. Something about, you can take the girl out of the gutter, but you can't take the gutter out of the girl. Alexander turned to his stepsister with eyes like ice. My wife, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, has more grace in her silence than you have in your entire vocabulary, Clarissa. I suggest you remember whose name is on this building and whose isn't. The room went quiet. Clarissa's face flushed crimson. Victoria watched from across the room, and for the first time, she felt something she'd never felt before. Fear. If Alexander fell in love with this girl, if he made her a permanent part of his life, Victoria's position was threatened. Everything she'd spent 20 years building could crumble. She needed insurance. She needed ammunition. So she hired a private investigator, the best in the city, to dig into Lily's past. Find something, she ordered. Anything. Proof that she's a fraud, a gold digger, a criminal. Something I can use to destroy her. The investigator took the job. Meanwhile, Alexander and Lily grew closer. One evening, they found themselves alone in the library. Rain pattered against the windows. A fire crackled in the hearth. They sat close together on the leather sofa, talking about everything and nothing. And then, without quite meaning to, Alexander leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was soft, gentle, real. When they pulled apart, Alexander whispered, "When this contract ends, I don't want you to leave." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She'd spent so long believing she was unlovable, unwanted, worthless. And here was this man, this impossible man, looking at her like she was precious. She couldn't speak, but her eyes said everything. That same night, in her private study, Victoria received the investigator's report. She opened the file, expecting ammunition. What she found made the blood drain from her face. This wasn't proof that Lily was a fraud. This was something far, far worse. This was proof that could destroy Victoria completely. Victoria's hands trembled as she read the investigator's report. It couldn't be true. It couldn't be. But the evidence was undeniable. Birth certificates, hospital records, DNA probability analysis, photographs. Lily wasn't a nobody. Lily was Elena Hartwell, the missing heiress of the Hartwell banking dynasty. The Hartwells had been one of the wealthiest families in America, rivals to the Blackwoods in power and prestige. 23 years ago, their only child, a 5-year-old girl named Elena, was kidnapped during a home invasion. The kidnappers were never caught. Elena was never found. Her parents, devastated, spent 2 years searching for her. They died in a car accident while chasing a false lead, leaving behind no heirs, no closure, and a fortune of $2.7 billion frozen in trust, waiting for Elena, dead or alive. For over 2 decades, that money had sat untouched. The Hartwell mystery was one of the great unsolved tragedies of high society. And now Victoria knew the truth. Elena was alive. Elena was here. Elena was the woman Victoria had been tormenting for months. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what else the investigator had uncovered. A photograph from the Hartwell household staff records, dated 23 years ago. A young woman in a nanny's uniform, holding baby Elena in her arms. The nanny's name was Victoria Mills. Before she was Victoria Blackwood, before she married into wealth and power, before she reinvented herself as a sophisticated socialite, Victoria had been a nanny, a struggling young woman looking for a way out of poverty. And she found one. The investigator's notes were clinical, devastating. Source indicates Victoria Mills facilitated access for kidnappers in exchange for portion of ransom. Plan failed when kidnappers abandoned child rather than risk capture. Subject Victoria Mills subsequently changed identity, relocated, and married Richard Blackwood approximately 2 years later. Victoria had sold Elena to kidnappers. And when the plan fell apart, when Elena was dumped in a strange city with no memory and no identity, Victoria had simply moved on, changed her name, found a wealthy widower to seduce, built a new life on the ruins of a child's. For 20 years, she'd gotten away with it. And now, by some cosmic twist of fate, the child she'd sold had walked back into her life. Victoria's mind raced. She could destroy the evidence, pay off the investigator, make this disappear. Or she could go further. She could make Lily disappear. Accidents happened. People fell. People drowned. People overdosed. A homeless girl with no identity. Who would really investigate? Victoria was making plans, dark, desperate plans, when the universe intervened. Richard Blackwood, in one of his increasingly rare moments of clarity, wandered into Victoria's study looking for his reading glasses. He found them on her desk, next to a photograph of a young woman in a nanny's uniform holding a baby. Richard picked it up with trembling hands, his clouded eyes focused with sudden, terrible clarity. "I remember this," he whispered. "I remember you. And I remember Elena." He looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, he saw her clearly. "What did you do?" Then he turned and walked away, straight to his son. Alexander listened to his father's confused, halting story with growing horror. Then he made calls. Within 48 hours, he had everything. The Hartwell family lawyers, armed with DNA evidence confirming Lily's identity. The original investigators' files that Victoria had tried to destroy. Witness statements from former staff members who remembered Victoria Mills. The case against Victoria was airtight. But Alexander didn't want just justice. He wanted vindication. The annual Blackwood Foundation Gala was 3 days away. 500 of the city's most influential people would be in attendance. Politicians, business leaders, media moguls. It was the perfect stage. Victoria arrived at the gala in diamonds and confidence. She'd convinced herself that Richard's outburst was dementia-fueled nonsense, that the investigator's file was destroyed, that she was safe. She smiled for cameras. She charmed donors. She played the gracious hostess to perfection, until Alexander took the stage. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Before we continue with the evening's program, I have an important announcement." Victoria noticed police officers entering the back of the room. Her smile faltered. "Many of you have met my wife, Lily. Some of you may have heard rumors about her background. Tonight, I'm here to tell you the truth." He extended his hand toward Lily, who stepped forward in a stunning designer gown, a real wedding dress, white and beautiful, a stark contrast to the servant's uniform she'd been forced to wear at her own wedding. This woman is not Lily the street beggar. This is Elena Hartwell, the long-lost heiress of the Hartwell banking dynasty. Her identity has been confirmed through DNA testing. Her inheritance, $2.7 billion, has been unlocked. She is one of the wealthiest women in this country. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning. "And tonight," Alexander continued, his voice hardening, "I'm also announcing that Victoria Blackwood will be arrested for her role in Elena's kidnapping 23 years ago." Victoria's wine glass shattered on the marble floor. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Police officers moved through the crowd. Clarissa screamed. Guests stumbled back in shock. And Victoria, desperate, cornered, terrified, did the only thing she could think of. She fell at her knees before Lily. "Please," she sobbed. "I'll do anything. I'll give everything back. Have mercy." The room held its breath. Lily looked down at the woman who had tormented her, the woman who had dressed her in servant's clothes, who had made her eat in the kitchen, who had stolen 23 years of her life. "I grew up cold, hungry, and alone because of you," Lily said quietly. "I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I belonged. I had no one." Victoria sobbed harder. "But I'm not going to let your evil make me cruel." Lily turned to the police officers. "Take her. Let the law decide her fate." Victoria was led away in handcuffs, her screams echoing through the marble halls of the mansion she'd schemed so long to possess. She would never set foot there again. 1 year later, the world looked very different. Victoria Blackwood, or rather, Victoria Mills, her original name restored, was serving a 25-year sentence for kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud. In prison, stripped of her designer clothes and society connections, she was finally facing consequences for a lifetime of cruelty and manipulation. Clarissa had been cut off entirely. No trust fund, no family support, no social standing. The young woman who'd once mocked Lily for being a cleaning girl now worked as a hotel receptionist, learning for the first time what it meant to earn her own way. Some said she was finally becoming a decent person. Others said karma had simply caught up. Richard Blackwood, freed from Victoria's toxic influence, had stabilized remarkably. His dementia still ebbed and flowed, but he had more good days than bad. He spent most of them in the garden with Elena, the girl he'd always remembered, the girl who'd finally come home. and Elena, Lily, had become one of the most beloved philanthropists in the country. She donated half of her Hartwell inheritance to foundations supporting homeless youth, foster children, and kidnapping survivors. She funded shelters and advocacy programs. She told her story in interviews, inspiring millions. "I was invisible once," she said in one famous speech. "I want to make sure no one ever feels invisible again." But the greatest transformation was in Alexander. The cold, closed-off billionaire who trusted no one, who'd built walls around his heart so high that no one could reach him, had become a different man, a better man. One evening, exactly 1 year after the gala, Alexander and Elena held a private ceremony in the garden. No media, no business associates, just family and true friends. They renewed their vows, real vows this time, promises made not from desperation, but from love. "You saved my life in more ways than you'll ever know," Alexander told her, his voice thick with emotion. "The bone marrow kept my heart beating. But you taught me what it should beat for." Elena smiled, took his hand, and placed it gently on her stomach. "Well," she whispered, "soon it'll have someone new to beat for." She was pregnant. Alexander pulled her into his arms, tears streaming down his face, the first tears he'd shed since he was 10 years old. And in that garden, surrounded by roses and hope and second chances, two broken people held each other and marveled at what they'd built from the ruins of pain. A family, a future, a fairy tale, not despite the darkness, but because of it. So what can we learn from Elena's incredible story? First, never underestimate someone because of their circumstances. The person you look down on today might be the one who saves your life tomorrow, or the one whose hidden truth exposes your own darkest secrets. Second, karma is patient, but karma is real. Victoria spent 20 years thinking she'd gotten away with everything. She was wrong. Third, your circumstances don't define you. Your choices do. Elena had every reason to become bitter, cruel, and vengeful. She chose grace instead, and that choice made all the difference. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Elena's place? Would you have shown mercy to Victoria or demanded maximum punishment? Tell me in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more incredible stories of betrayal, redemption, and karma coming every single week. And remember, you're not your past. You're not your circumstances. You are what you choose to become. Until next time.